What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy TreJuanJohnson back with another episode of the No Disrespect But podcast. Before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Always feel free to comment. Just please make sure you keep those comments respectful. And if you're interested in supporting your favorite podcast, yours truly, your boy's Cash App will be in the episode description. Now, today's episode is a little special. Um, got a recommendation from a subscriber and a Twitter friend or ex friend, as you can say, or friend on X, not ex friend. But my boy DJ, you can find him at Saints underscore country on X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And so after reviewing last week's episode, where I just kind of talked about, you know, the Saints rebuilding, what it looks like, that type of thing. He said it was a great listen. And he said, hey, maybe next episode, can you talk about each of the top four quarterbacks in the draft, where you would be comfortable taking them, so where I would be comfortable taking them, and who would I like in Kellen Moore's system, and share a little bit about what I'm hearing about who Kellen Moore likes in this draft. So, DJ, this one is for you, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. And if you do understand that, much like DJ, you can recommend and provide suggestions of what you'd like to hear, because I am here for you guys and want to provide the content that you want to listen to and see. So, without further ado, let's get with it. So, to set the stage, when we say top four quarterbacks, I'll give you my top four quarterbacks, and I think this might be the at least the consensus top four quarterbacks in this draft, maybe in different orders, but I'm going to actually rank them in the order that I have them. And in the four, it's one, Cam Ward; two, Shador Sanders; three, Jalen Milroe; and four, Jackson Dart. And I'll mention this when I get to the last two, but I kind of have them more as a 3A, 3B type of deal. I think there are strengths in Jackson Dart's game that could catapult him even past the Shador Sanders in some teams' eyes. And I think there's something in Jalen Milroe's game that can catapult him and obviously have him be one of the highest quarterbacks take, or one of the top quarterbacks taken to build around for the future. So not necessarily now, but for the future, maybe have him come in, sit for a year, but maybe have him play some spot up duty like the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson when he first got in. But we'll get to that in a second. So I will start with my number one guy. I think at this point in the draft, everyone but Mel Kiper has this guy as the top overall quarterback in this year's class, and that being Cam Ward. Now, Cam Ward, 5-year starter at three different schools, started his career at the University of the Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Texas, Southland Conference representative, Southland versus all y'all, as we like to say. Then he transferred, followed a coach to Washington State. Wazoo was there for a couple years, and then finished out his year of eligibility at the University of Miami, the U. That was ugly U. The U, that's better. Oh my God, what is this? Like a teardrop. Anyways, the U. He finished out his last year. Well, he had a phenomenal season. Now, career-wise, and look, when I talk about career touchdowns, it's going to be their time as a starter. So, for example, Cam, 5 years; Shador, 4 years; Jackson Dart, 3 years, technically 3.5, but he wasn't the full time starter at USC, so I didn't count that. And obviously, Jalen Milroe, 2 years as the full time starting quarterback at the University of Alabama. So, Cam Ward, 5-year starter, and in that time, 158 passing touchdowns, an additional 20 rush touchdowns, so over almost 180 total touchdowns in his career. 37 interceptions, which really isn't bad. I mean, that's not even averaging 8 interceptions a year. So the ability for a quarterback to keep those numbers down. Now, granted, you want to say, hey, he spent he spent 2 years at the FCS level, but still, even at Washington State in those 2 years, his interceptions weren't incredibly high, and I think the most interceptions he's ever thrown in the season was 11, if I'm not mistaken. So he's pretty much kept those things in single digits, which is pretty rare this day and age, especially with the high volume of passing that's going on in the college game and even the NFL game. So I think the level of experience, that ability to take care of the ball in regards to putting it up in the air, that's beneficial. And last year probably had his best year at the FBS level. Of course, had a phenomenal year his last year at UIW think he had 40 something touchdowns, but passing touchdowns, and then some more rushing touchdowns. But at Miami, over 4,300 yards passing, 39 passing touchdowns. I can't remember how many he had on the ground. He completed 67% of his passes last year, which is pretty good. Um, and look, there were some things I watched a few games. I've been pretty much watching every aspect of Cam Ward's career. He was a guy that, at one point in time, we would talk about, hey, would the Saints take a flyer on him in the second and third round? I mean, the guy has, I think when he was after his first year at Washington State, and even after his second year where they thought he might go pro, and he had some second and third round grades, there were talks that, hey, the Saints might really be looking at this guy. And of course, Cam has spoken openly about being a New Orleans Saints fan growing up. And, it would be a dream of his to play for the New Orleans Saints. And, he said that once before. He said that currently as well. And so, that could happen, right? Or, you would hope it could happen as a Saints fan. So, it's interesting now that there are talks that he could be a Saints, a member of the New Orleans Saints, when there had been talks maybe the past couple years, especially last year when there was talks that he may into the draft and was looked at as a guy that could be a second round pick or something like that. But goes to Miami, does well, and look, there were some things I liked watching him, especially last year, and there were some things I disliked watching throughout his whole career. And he might be the quarterback that maybe I watched the most in terms of length time because I got to see a lot more of him. Uh, especially with his time in the Southland Conference than maybe the other prospects, and that's being an Alabama fan and watching Jalen Milroe for 2 years as a starter. And obviously the year before he actually became the starter, coming in, starting a couple of games for Bryce Young. So, what I like about Cam Ward, look, I love the size, 6'2", over 220 pounds, big playability, big arm. The ball, I don't even, like, it's like a kite coming out of his hand. It's just the amount of air that it gets just when he releases it is phenomenal. And I think we saw that in his pro day, just a flick of the wrist, if you will, where there's not a lot of lower body strength or even overcompensating on the upper body to make these throws. It just seems natural to him. And so I love that. And a guy that can make throws at multiple angles. Yeah, he completed 67% of his passes. I think that was one of the highs he ever had in his career. But he made some very tight window throws, some big boy NFL throws, and that was one of the things kind of going towards the end of the year that separated him from me from a Shedeur Sanders, especially given the level of competition that he was playing. I think he always, uh, in a way, added to that, pushed himself to get to that next level. And so going from the Southland Conference in the FCS to your first in FBS, going towards the Pac-12, and then going to the ACC, and dominating in every aspect of it. That's something that I really like. You guys know how I feel about fifth-year seniors and guys that have started a long time and wanting to see, if you're going to be a 5-year starter or a fifth-year senior and a 5-year starter, I want to see you take that next step. I want you to look like a man amongst boys at times. And I think, excuse me, I think Cam was able to express that and show and or display that, sorry, on the field. And so I love that experience and I love that ability to make any throw. And he has what I call selective mobility. You're going to look at his stats and you're going to say, oh my God, he didn't rush for a lot of yards because look, he's not a dual threat quarterback. I know that's the easy thing to do with the African American quarterback and say, hey, they're a dual threat quarterback, but that's not what he is, right? He's a quarterback that can run. And look, you're not about to run read option and build a running game around him. But if he has lanes, he will take them. He will get 5 or 6 yards more times than not. And usually when he does scramble, he's looking to make a big play with his own. And so you kind of love that in your quarterback to where they don't rely heavily on their legs. They keep their eyes downfield, can still make those big play throws, but also, hey, get out of the pocket sometimes, get 5 or 6 yards, maybe even get a first down, get out of bounds. We can live to see the rest of the drive. Now, some of the things I did dislike, look, again, when you guys have heard me talk about the fifth-year senior and things like that, in my humble opinion, and have been proven wrong sometimes, and I've been proven right in sometimes in this case. Guys that have played that long, you almost what you've seen their last season in college is what you'll see the next 10 years of their career, which isn't always a bad thing, right? If Cam Ward can utilize all the abilities and things that he did throughout his collegiate career in the NFL, I think he will have a phenomenal career. But based on some of his colleagues and their trajectories, and then, of course, some of the quarterbacks that are going to be coming in after this class, right? By the time they have reached their 5th year as starters, are they much better in their 5th year as starters, which will probably be, somewhere between what their second and third year in the NFL? Will they be much better NFL players than the guy that spent 5 years in college and is now in his 8th year as a starter at that point in time? But 3 years in the NFL. Where is the talent aspect of it all? And so those are some of the things that concern me, but that's just maybe my bias, right, towards the 5th year senior at the quarterback position, especially when they've played at least 4 or 5 of those years, right? So career growth trajectory. Are you always going to be here, or is there something else? Is there another level that we haven't seen yet that through coaching and development and being in the NFL you will reach? And so those are always sometimes one of my concerns. I do think, like any quarterback that has big playability, you can hunt it, and sometimes you can hunt it too often. And there's been times in his career, although he doesn't, throw a lot of interceptions. He has had some issues with fumbles, and more so, hey, hold it, hold it. I'm out. I'm rolling out. I'm trying to get this play. I see my guy. I'm about to throw it. Boom, get hit by the defender. So, that can put your offensive line in some bad situations. We saw that with Caleb Williams this past year, in the amount of hits that he took, and we were able to talk about, hey, he was making these decisions and making these big crazy plays in college, but in the NFL, that gets you hit and that gets you hurt. And so, um, want to see him maybe process some things a little bit quickly, maybe take that check down a little bit more often. Throwaways are okay. And then sometimes use, I say he has selective mobility. Hit that select button a little bit more often sometimes. And so take the 4 or 5 yard rush as opposed to consistently trying to wait for the big play, because the guys that we're going to be playing against, right, are bigger, faster, stronger than what you see in the college stage. And so just want to see him not maybe hunt as many big plays. We do want big plays, right? But know when and have that presence of mind of when to get rid of the ball. And you guys have probably seen some of my tweets about Cam Ward, and I do this a lot with again 5th year quarterbacks. This is my bias, but sometimes when I see maybe throws that they probably should have seen given their level of experience. Now, Cam's a little bit different in that he's a 5-year starter, right? But he's been to 3 different schools. And so while yes, I may see the defense, he might have a good knowledge of that, especially pre-snap. He's still learning his new offensive system. He's learning where guys need to be. And so where he might be seeing something one way, maybe his receiver didn't see it. And so those are the things that I don't have internal knowledge of watching the game. Because maybe he wasn't wrong to throw the ball where he threw it. But to me, it looks like, how did you not see that safety there? How did you not see that linebacker, dropping back in coverage? How did you not see that? But the thing is, maybe he did know that was going to happen, but he expected his guy to be in a certain area and he made that throw. So those are the things that, as an observer, I don't have the intel for that. I don't have the in-depth knowledge to know what was going in his head pre-snap as to why he made that throw. And so those are things that I have to take into account as well, because it's easy to blame the quarterback for that because of what we were able to see. But what we're able to see doesn't necessarily mean we have the whole story behind everything, what the play call was, what he was expecting, what actually got ran. So there's that. But lastly, where would I draft him? Look, he's #1 quarterback on the board. I know everybody's talking about maybe the Titans might draft a quarterback, or they may trade their pick. Whatever it is, I think the guy is going to be the first quarterback taken. Whether that's somebody trading up with the Titans for the top pick, maybe that's the Browns drafting, which If you guys saw my list of predictions, I predicted Cam Ward to be drafted by the Cleveland Browns at number 2. I did predict that the Tennessee Titans would pass on a quarterback in the first round and go get a talent like a Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter to shore up their defense on or in the first overall pick or whatever, or maybe even trade down to pick 2 or pick 3 to make sure they're still in position to get an Abdul Carter or a Travis Hunter, while maybe getting the veteran in and then drafting a rookie later on in the draft, or hell, waiting to the 2026 class, whatever that might be. So I actually do have Cam Ward. I haven't predicted to the Browns now. And again, in general, I don't think Cleveland will let him get past them, but things can happen. We get surprised by the draft all the time. From a Saints perspective, um, I think, or any team that's interested, I would be beating down the Titans' door. Their general manager will be getting a call from me every hour on the hour. Hell, probably every 10 to 15 minutes to see if they're ready to strike a deal yet. Because I think Cam Ward's good. Now, I think some of the prices that people are talking about, I don't know. I don't know if he's that good. I don't know if this class is that good to be making those types of trade ups for the quarterback position. This isn't the Bryce Young and CJ Stroud class. I don't think you have to do things like that. Speaking of class, you guys are probably wondering, Trey, you're wearing a Dolphins jersey. Why are you? And you're a Saints fan. Well, look, also, I'm a Bama fan. This is a Tua jersey. I collect all of my guys that are in the league, except for those that are on the Falcons. I'm sorry. I just can't have that in my wardrobe, providing that bad juju in my house. But one of the reasons why I wore this, just to take a side note, is that this is probably the most excited I've been for a quarterback class in relation to who the Saints might pick since this class came out. Remember there were talks about, hey, the Saints might trade Drew Brees and draft Joe Burrow, or hey, Tua, because of the hip injury, he may fall. Also, if you don't want those guys, they were attached to or connected to a Jordan Love coming out of Utah State, a Jalen Hurts late in the first round or early in the second. And as you know, we didn't get any of these guys, and they've all turned out to be phenomenal players. I would love to have one of them on the team at this point in time, but it is what it is. And so, when it comes to this class and where the Saints are picking, this is probably the closest they've ever been in years to being able to address the quarterback position. And so, from a draft standpoint, so excited about that. So that's why I decided to rock the Tua jersey today. But, anyways, finished with Cam Ward. I predict that he'll go to Cleveland. But if I'm New Orleans Saints, I'm beating down the Titans' door to try to get him. See what we can do. See if we can strike a deal. Now going over to my second quarterback in this draft, Shedeur Sanders, a 4-year starter at 2 schools, at Jackson State University. That's where he started. And then obviously transferred to Colorado to continue to play for his father, Prime Time. Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, and spent 2 years there for the Bucks. In his career, 134 passing touchdowns, 17 rush touchdowns, 27 interceptions. So again, another quarterback that has extensive experience, but doesn't turn the ball over from an interception standpoint. So that's something that really stands out. You got to appreciate that, because in this day and age, with the high volume of passing, especially as far as Shedeur Sanders is concerned, with the amount of times his teams had to lean on his arm to win games, to only have 27 interceptions in that 4-year span, that's incredible and remarkable in my eyes. Last year had over 4,000 passing yards, 37 passing touchdowns, had a 74% completion percentage, which is amazing. Now, granted, look, we know in a college game, not everything's the deep ball. There's some screens, there's some sweeps and everything like that, but he was threading the needle at times and getting the ball in certain areas. And that's actually one of the things I love about him. I gotta say what I like, but I love that about Shedeur Sanders, just his accuracy, and ability to um, just get the ball to his guys. He's a great facilitator. When you have a unique talent like a Travis Hunter, it's easy to lock in on him, but he got other guys involved. So much so that a guy like Will Shepard, that was a 3-year starter at Vanderbilt, wanted to come and play, and he got some shine. LeJohntay Webster got some shine among other receivers, even some young guys that were coming in. Shedeur was able to get them involved, and he wasn't keen on one guy, and that made them dangerous at times. in their passing game. And I would say one thing I really love is that he's probably one of the few quarterbacks in his class that played in a pro style system. He played for an NFL head coach, an offensive coordinator, and Coach Pat Shermer, who brought an NFL system to Colorado, and they did really well together. So I do think that that plays a role in my evaluation of him. I think that plays a role in other teams' evaluation of him. And I think what also plays a role is what I have in the dislikes. You play in a pro style system, and our guest a few episodes ago, Coach Chase and Virgil, talked about this. Hey, he's been in the pro style system, but he took a lot of sacks. And if you're taking a lot of sacks in a pro style system in a college game, what's going on? Is it an issue of you're not reading the field well and things like that? So he's going to have to show that he can get rid of the ball. We talk about the 74% completion percentage, but think about how many plays that Shador tried to keep alive, and instead of throwing the ball away, he held on to it, and that resulted in a sack. And so that's something that I think about when I think about Shador Sanders. Holds on the ball maybe a little bit too long, maybe protects his percentage a little bit too much. And we know in the NFL, if you're a quarterback that protects your percentage and you won't make deep throw, you don't really last long. And so it doesn't matter that you had high percentages. If you can't try to make deep throws when they need them, even at risk of your percentage, or you don't want to throw the ball away and you're just trying to extend, that can hurt. And so that's something that's going to have to get cleaned up because, not every, I mean, if you're a top pick, you're not going to a ready-made team. You're going to maybe have some offensive line issues. You probably won't have as much talent at the wide receiver position that you had throughout your career at both Colorado and Jackson State. So, hey, we may need you to get the ball out a little bit quicker. We may need you to not take the sacks. We may need you to throw the ball away and not take those hits. So, looking forward to see what he does there. Now, where would Trey draft him? Look, I think he's a top 10 pick. I can see why there's some reservation of whether he's going to be the first or second quarterback taken, and there might be a guy like a Jackson Dart that could usurp him at that role. But I think the talent is talent. I think we've seen the production at two stops where the guy took two rebuilding programs and exceeded all of their expectations from an offensive standpoint, especially, and able to keep them in games. I mean, win games, put it on his shoulders. We saw him able to do that. Now, I didn't put this in the dislikes, but when I think about Shador's performance in big games, they weren't always the best. Um, when Colorado had everything in front of them, or even when Jackson State, they were able to make it to the Celebration Bowl, and you saw that it maybe took a little bit of time, right? And will that haunt him in the NFL? I don't know. I mean, again, Colorado wasn't always the most talented team going up in these big matchups, and so maybe there was a differential there that I have to take into account. But either way, the guy's a top 10 quarterback. I think he is the a top two quarterback, and could theoretically still push Cam Ward for quarterback one. But I just think Cam has separated himself just in the level of games he played in, the level of competition, and just kind of how he's carried himself throughout this process. Um, but look, I can also see him falling, and I think a team like the Saints, if he's at 9, I think you really strongly consider it. I think team like Vegas, who he obviously has that relationship with Tom Brady and that ownership group, that could be a team that takes a gamble. I can see a team like Dallas, and if that's actually my prediction, right? I think Shador Sanders starts to fall. I think Jerry Jones says, "Hey, look, I let my sons handle certain things in the off season, but this one is mine. I will talk to a team in the top 10, maybe talk to the team with the ninth pick if it comes to that, and try to get into the top 10 to draft a Shador Sanders." And so I would be interested to see if that happens. That's actually my prediction. Maybe sit behind Dak Prescott for a year, and then they move off of Dak, and Shador's your quarterback going forward. So no, QB3A, however you want to say it. Jalen Milroe, 2-year starter at Alabama, led the SEC in total touchdowns last year. Had in his career in the 2 years, right? Again, I didn't count the stint that he came and played in for Bryce Young, but 39 passing touchdowns, 32 rushing touchdowns, 17 interceptions. So one thing you see, right? You had a guy that had what 37 interceptions and a guy that had 27 interceptions with twice as many years as starting, and he's almost reached uh, their interception totals, right? So definitely shows the improvement that needs to happen as a passer and in protecting the ball. Last year had 3,500 total yards. It was 2,800 passing, about 700 something rushing, 36 total touchdowns, 16 through the air, and 20 on the ground, and had 11 interceptions. And some of those interceptions were, well, pretty much a lot of them were crucial points of the game. Pick six against Vanderbilt. I think two pick sixes against OU. Had two crucial interceptions against Tennessee. All losses, by the way. And so it didn't necessarily play his best game, which was his last game as a member of Alabama versus Michigan. But look, there are some things I like. Look, I love his size profile. Again, fits the mold of the prototypical quarterback size that you want. Love his arm strength. His ability to get the ball down the field was one of the highest graded deep ball passers in the NCAA last year. I love his mobility. He doesn't have selective mobility. He has the goods, and he has the big playability, both with his legs and with his arm. And so I love that, especially as a Saints fan when I think about our team not having too many big plays, especially on the ground. So maybe having a quarterback that can help um, impact both areas where you were kind of deficient throughout the year and over the past 2 years. Um, I feel like he fits the current mold of quarterbacks, guys that have that mobility and have that big arm, and coaches just wanting to fine tune the passing skills, but understand that they have a guy that can win games for them multiple ways, a la Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. I love his leadership ability at Alabama, and I love his adaptability. People forget he was in three different systems at the University of Alabama during his time there, and in the past 2 years being in two different systems, and so being able to adapt to that um, and play relatively well and put Alabama in position to control their own destiny worked the year before, didn't work this past season, and that happened. So obviously, let's get to the dislikes. Accuracy, we got to talk about the accuracy. It just hasn't been as good as it needs to be, especially in the intermediate area. I think maybe the first 6 or 7 games, he was really, really good, playing at a high level, taking what the defense was giving him. Obviously, that helped with the deep ball. Then I think we got to a point where we were too reliant on the deep ball, maybe one trick ponies, not utilizing those sweeps and those screens, those kind of short routes to the tight ends, getting the ball out to the running backs in the flat and things like that, or on those wheel routes. We just, for some reason, really stopped. I think a lot of that had to do with the injuries on the offensive line and obviously not being able to get a sustainable running game with your running backs, and then utilizing Milrow a little bit too much, I think, as a runner, which obviously I think affected his mechanics, which was something that was like, hey, his footwork mechanics have to get better and more consistent. I felt like they started to dwindle throughout the season, especially the more hits that he was taking as a runner. And I think almost a little bit of a shell shock. I know everybody talks about some of the inaccuracies, but I think if you look at the tape, when your tackles and your guards are being pushed back into you, which again, one of my knocks on Milrow was consistency in depth. You can't just take 2 steps and think you have enough room. You got to kind of help your offense line out a little bit, have a deeper drop, a deeper drop almost. And so those are things that, hey, when I looked at his pro day and even the NFL combine, I saw changes in that, right? And that's a shout out to Coach Jordan Palmer, who's been working with them now. But definitely a quarterback that needs some work still from a passing standpoint. But this day and age, I think good coaches they can make that work. Now, where would I take him? This is the best way I'll describe Milroy, and I'll describe Dart the same way. I think from a talent perspective, you would be extremely comfortable taking him in the second round. But I understand that the importance of the quarterback position and that he has first round upside. You take him in the first round because, especially if you're a team in that top 10, because you're getting to a space where teams in the late teens and 20s And even in the back end, where there might be teams that are in that second round that want to come back in and jump you, they may have a better shot. And I believe that if you want the quarterback, you don't wait. You go get them and you figure the rest out. And so when I say that from a Saints perspective, I'll take them at 9. Now, where I'm more comfortable at is if I knew Miller was my guy, okay, I knew that was the quarterback I was going to take in this year's draft. And I've done my due diligence around the league. I know my safe spots. I know if I get to this spot, I am no longer in jeopardy. I'm not in jeopardy of losing out the prospect I want because God forbid you trade back because you want to trade Milrow and then somebody else like the Rams or the Steelers jumps a spot in front of you and you don't get them anymore, right? So I am comfortable somewhere between 12 to 20. I would love to stay in the teens, but hey, Dallas, you want Shador, he's falling. There's a team that's calling us. They want to jump. They want to jump. And then Dallas not only trades with us 3 spots, but they give us a king's ransom for those 3 spots because maybe we're talking to the Rams. Maybe we're talking to the Steelers, right? Maybe the Giants are talking to us to try to jump really back into it, or whatever it might be. And we're like, okay. Like, and then Dallas makes a Godfather offer, and they get Shador Sanders. We're in like a 12 spot, maybe get a third round pick from this year, and maybe a first next year. And now we got enough picks to really build around it. And so that's where I'm comfortable, right? I'm comfortable trading back a little bit, compiling some more picks to build around not just a Jalen Milrow, who may not, who I think wouldn't be your day one starter, but you could use those picks to get some support for not just the offensive side of the ball, but even that defensive side of the ball as you're trying to grow it. Now, let me um, finish off with Jackson Dart, who is I have ranked fourth, but 3B or whatever, however you want to say it. 3-year starter at Ole Miss. Obviously had some starts at USC, but I didn't count those. Finished his career as the all-time leading passer in Ole Miss history, passing my boy Eli Manning. Had 72 touchdowns in the air, 12 touchdowns on the ground, 22 interceptions, which was good. And he drastically reduced those throughout his career at Ole Miss too. And last year had 32 total touchdowns, 6 interceptions, over 4,200 passing yards. So a really good year statistically for him. One thing I like about Jackson Dart, again, has that NFL size and has that NFL durability. He took some big hits because he just did not want to slide, but he was able to maintain really good health. And even if he did have a few nicks here and there, he was able to play through it. And it didn't really affect his passing as much. Again, has that big arm, can make multiple angle throws, which I really like. And he, much like Cam, has that selective mobility. Lane didn't really use him a ton in the run game. It was very selective. You see a few quarterback design runs here and there, but it was nothing the way he's used a Jalen Hurts or even Matt Corral. Matt Corral saw a lot of design quarterback runs, especially in the red zone, and Jackson Dart just didn't. And I think that was, when everybody's trying to compare him to Jalen Hurts, I do point to that because the coach that coached both of those players used them drastically different. And then I kind of think that kind of lets you know that that's not his cup of tea, but he can run. He can extend plays. He can go pick up that first down, but you're not going to build an offensive run game around Jackson Dart's rushing ability. And that's fine for me because, again, he has that selective mobility. He knows how to get out. He knows how to extend plays. He knows how to pick up yards with his feet and legs when he needs to. Some of my dislikes, I think at times throughout his career, and whether it's him or the coach, who knows, but I don't think there was a level of adaptation when defenses made adjustments. I think Ole Miss had a few opening scripts, especially during the first half. And I think when you went out to the locker room, you saw a lot of second half blunders by Ole Miss. The way that they were taking it to LSU offensively, and LSU started to get their things going offensively. and they started to make some adjustments defensively, and Ole Miss just could not capitalize. They did not have that same level of intensity that you saw earlier. Um, some of these big games that are on Ole Miss's schedule, we didn't see the big performances that you needed from your quarterbacks in those times. When we think of the top quarterbacks in the SEC that represented SEC championship teams, Jalen Milroe a year ago, um, even Jaden Daniels, who got, he didn't get to it his last year, but hell, it wasn't because of him that LSU didn't get to Atlanta his last year as a starter, but even a year before where he got them to Atlanta and being able to raise his game to a whole nother level in some of these huge performances that got LSU a win in the SEC West to represent that division there. Carson Beck and the way he played in big games a season ago. We can talk about Joe Burrow. We can talk about Tua Tagovailoa, and quarterbacks like that just stepped up a little bit to the plate to get their teams over the hump. And I just don't think Jackson Dart did that enough. Now, whether that's him or the coaching staff, I don't know, because we understand that Lane Kiffin, he's not a big game performer either at times. Even as an offensive coordinator at Alabama, I think there were games like the Ohio State game where Alabama lost. They were up big, that he kind of folded a little bit. And obviously, he left right in the middle of a championship, like right before the championship game, or was fired right before the championship game, um, you know, when Alabama eventually lost to Clemson. So I don't know, but those are some of the things I dislike. And then I think he wasn't a very quarterback friendly offense. So does that translate? Well, I mean, when you think of a Kellen Moore who fits his offenses around who he has, maybe that's okay, but is that sustainable? So that's something that I'm looking to see. Now, where would I draft him? I think Jackson Dart can go as high as top three. I've talked about this many times. I think he can be the second quarterback taken because when you look at raw talent, not just production, not production, because I think Shador Sanders has more than outperformed from a statistical standpoint, Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart also plays in the SEC. He's played well against Nick Saban teams. He's played well against Kirby Smart teams. He got a win against Georgia last year. Wasn't the greatest game, but he was able to make more plays than the other team, right? And do what it takes to win. So we've seen him against this level of competition. Had a big win against LSU in a duel versus Jaden Daniels, right, a year ago. Um, and again, his ability, his arm strength, his arm talent, those are traits that you might say, damn, with that upside, again, he's a 3-year starter. By the time he's finished his 4th year starting, or he's finished his 5th year starting, where are those two guys in relation in the National Football League? And so I could see a team falling in love with the physical traits of a Jackson Dart, but also he has that level of cockiness too that Shador has, but obviously we're not gonna get into that subject of one's a little bit more beloved than the other, but it is what it is, right? But that's the Zach Wilson effect almost, right? That's the cool, suave guy, big arm, can make the crazy throws. And then you get them into the league and they can't make the simple throws that you want them to make. So again, I can see him being a second quarterback taken, but again, in my mind, much like Milroe, I view Jackson Dart as a guy that ideally you want in the second round, but because of the nature of the quarterback position, they may not be there. And so I would take him at 9. I would trade back a little bit and make sure I'm in a good position to still um, draft him. Sorry. All right, that was crazy. Had a little technical difficulties there, but we are good. So that's kind of where I'm at with Jackson Dart right now. Kind of same ballpark as Milroe. I don't know. I would love to have him at pick 40, but hell, if they're at 9 and I really want a quarterback where I have an opportunity to trade back a little bit, knowing I can still get them, but acquire additional picks, I'm taking that opportunity. Um, and our last part as we get close to the end of the show. Tell him more. What does he think? What would he like? Now, I will say this. What I'm going to say, part of it is stuff I know, and some of it is what I think. And I will tell you the difference. I won't be one of those people that will I'm speaking about what I think, but I will refer to it as if it's a fact. I'm not going to do that. I will tell you what I think and what I know. And what I know, starting with what I know, which I feel like everybody knows, everybody but Mel Kiper, is that Cam Ward is quarterback one on everybody's board. Even if you have a quarterback. Like, if you're the Carolina Panthers, guess what? You're asking who's the top quarterback in the draft. They're going to say Cam Ward. You're the Cincinnati Bengals. You're the Baltimore Ravens. Hey, who's the top quarterback on the board? If you had a quarterback on your board, who's the top of that list? It's going to be Cam Ward. It is what it is, right? And here's the thing: he's on ours. And I've had conversations with folks over the past few weeks, and I've been asked about, hey, where are we with Cam Ward? What do we like about him? And what I've always said was, Cam Ward's the top guy on the list, but it's more about, can you get him? Like, it's hell, if he fail, of course, it's a no-brainer. But can I go get him? What does it take to go get him? Is it worth going and get him when I have other guys on the list? Like, yes, I have Cam Ward quarterback one, but I won't say that from a career trajectory standpoint. I'm just betting on him having a much better career than Shedeur Sanders, a much better career than Jalen Milroe, a much better career than Jackson Dart. And hell, I haven't even mentioned the Quinn Ewers and Kyle McCards of the world, or even the guys that are coming in a year later. If you're one of those teams that say, hey, I don't need a quarterback now, I'll wait. So I'm not going to go there. But um, I think it was just a matter of, yeah, he's the top guy, but there's no chance we're getting him. And then you start to, hear about Tennessee, and maybe they're looking more of a veteran route, and they want to wait, and they want to maybe get the best player available, which would be an Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, as opposed to getting the best quarterback available. Um, you start to hear about maybe teams like the Giants maybe not wanting a quarterback, the Raiders, trade for Geno Smith and they sign him to an extension where he's going to be making $40 million a year. So you start to say, oh, I'm, I may have an opportunity. And I think if the reported interest is as equally high as just the initial interest that the Saints and other teams, let's just be honest, had in Cam Ward, Mickey Loomis is going to turn over every single stone he can and try to make things work to present a case to Tennessee as to why they should drop all the way to the ninth pick, give us the first overall pick so we can get Cam Ward. And I think what scares me there is that I'm just not confident that Tennessee is willing to drop that far to pass on talents like Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Mason Graham, um, and guys like that. Because I think once you really get past them, you kind of get into guys that maybe could be good, like a Tyler Warren or some of these offensive linemen coming out. Like you really are playing with fire almost when it comes to that. And so, would Tennessee be willing to do that if Mickey made an offer worthwhile? Well, hell, we're gonna find out because we know that offers are being made and they're having discussions. Some of those discussions are related to Derek Carr, but some of those discussions are related to that top pick as well, and what it would take for the Saints to get that. And I don't think we're the only ones. I thought the Giants would be in contention to talk with them, but they just signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. They signed Russell to a $21 million deal, so he's their starting quarterback next year. So that's interesting. But anyways, that's kind of what I know about Cam Ward. Of course, he's the top guy on the board, but it was we don't think we can get him. But there's been some changes over the past few weeks that Tennessee is indeed open for business for the number one overall pick, and we're at least doing our due diligence and trying to do that. That's what I know. Also, what I do know is that of the quarterbacks, Jalen Milroe is seen as the realistic target, and who Kellen would want to build around. Again, a lot of that was because Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders were seen as pipe dreams. Then we get into, okay, now we might be more so in the Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Kyle McCord, Quinn Ewers sweepstakes, right? Who are those guys do I want to build around? Kellen is a guy that has inherited every quarterback he's worked with. Obviously, the Jalen Hurts is the quarterback he won a championship with. But to be quite honest, what we don't know, and what I don't know, is truly what Kellen Moore, what his ideal quarterback is, because he's done it differently, right? Dak was a guy that grew into a much better passer, right? But he was a dual threat, but more of a powerful guy, more of a short yardage guy that you're using with. Justin Herbert, obviously, with a much better passer, just talented, arm talent, great, can do those things. And then you get to a Jalen Hurts who has that dual threat ability, who can make big plays with his legs, but also can make some really good throws. And so what I do know is that Jalen Murray was seen as the realistic target that they could go after, and that Kellen Moore could devise a plan around, in terms of his development. But again, things have changed, right? Cam Ward, first overall pick, might be available. Shedeur Sanders may fall. And I'll get to Shedeur last. Let me go to Jackson Dart. From what I heard, he was 2A. Again, Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart. 2A, however you want to do it. And more so, and here's what I think. I think Jackson Dart is considered because he's more of the Justin Herbert type, a guy that can extend plays, selective mobility, is not a pocket statue, just has some unbelievable arm talent. And just the things that they can do passing the ball, you feel like you can get a lot out of that. And maybe Kellen wasn't able to get as much uh, uh, out of Justin Herbert as much as he would have liked to. Obviously, Justin Herbert was dealing with injuries that season. The coach got fired, things like that. But what I think is that based on two of the three quarterbacks that Kellen Moore has had experience with, a quarterback that impacts the running game is of some level of significant importance. His best years were when Dak was a good passer and you still built around his legs and Ezekiel Elliott. Later in his tenure with the Cowboys, when Ezekiel was fizzling out and they wanted to grow Dak as a passer, Dak had the pass, like he grew passing yards, passing touchdowns, but Dak also started to have that turnover bug. And there were talks with Mike McCarthy that Mike McCarthy felt like Kellen Moore was too pass happy at times. One of the reasons why he made the move to relieve relieve Kellen Moore of his duties as offensive coordinator, and that's when Kellen took the offensive coordinator job in Los Angeles. Sorry, creature of habit. So with a guy like a Jackson Dart, who doesn't have that mobility that you can really kind of safeguard yourself the way you did with the Eagles and were able to be one of the least amount of passing as far as attempts in the league, you can't minimize Jackson Dart. He's not a quarterback you minimize. You have to let him throw the ball. You have to let him get guys involved in the passing game because he can't necessarily give you the design quarterback runs and that type of thing to relieve some of that stress. And does that increase the likelihood of interceptions? We've seen in his career that while Jackson Dart's his numbers started to drop in games where Ole Miss really needed to rely on his passing ability, the turnovers, and rely on him, the turnovers peaked up. And maybe part of that was because Lane couldn't go to maybe utilizing a running threat to neutralize defenses and had to rely so heavily on Jackson's arm. And obviously, the more you pass it, the more opportunities you give to have bad and negative plays. And that's what would happen sometimes in some of these crucial matchups against SEC teams. That was a difference between them being in Atlanta for the championship game and not, them being in a playoff and not being in a playoff. But Jackson Dart, 2-way, and I think that has to do with Kellen's experience with Justin Herbert. But at the same time, I think that based on his career experience and success as a play caller, dual quarterbacks and their impact in the running game is of some significant importance. unless you have a quarterback like a Cam Ward, who you don't have to design running plays for him, but his intellect and his big game performances, and his experience as a starter, and being a guy that's ready right now, you can lean on that a little bit more. So that's kind of where I'll go with that. And now let's go with Shador. So you see that I had Cam, obviously unanimous number one. Milrow and Dart battling for two spot right now. That's kind of a discussion going on. And obviously they're doing their due diligence with other quarterbacks. Obviously meeting with Quinn Ewers while they were in Texas and stuff like that. From what I heard, Shador interview with the Saints didn't go extremely well. I think part of that is because, much like the Saints viewed Cam Ward as a pipe dream, I think Shador Sanders views himself as a pipe dream of why am I talking to you? Because I won't be here by the time you're here to draft and by that time you're here to pick. And you guys heard about the report that there was a team that met with him, or a few teams that met with him, and it felt like he felt like he could be anywhere. He would rather be anywhere else than in a room with them. And almost that he didn't care about playing for the organization and representing them because I mean, he just didn't think they're going to be there, right? Uh, which I get from his perspective. Like, why am I wasting my time? Like, we've been on job interviews. Like, bro, I'm just here to get it going. I really don't want this job. There's like a job just paying $200,000 more, much better pension plan, much better benefits. I'm just here, just biding my time. And when you're done, I'm going to accept that position. I'm going. So we've been there. So I'm not going to judge Shador now, if that indeed even happened. And I say that because, look, it's draft season, man. You about to start hearing some crazy stuff about prospects. They're trying to get guys to fall. They're trying to get, they're trying to get in a position where they can either trade up for a guy, stuff like that, and blow other teams off the trail because they might be like, oh, well, that's Shador Sanders. That guy's crazy. He's a narcissist, and I don't want to draft him. And then, lo and behold, the same team that was spreading the rumors about him, they end up drafting him. And Shador doesn't know that. His agent doesn't know that because had they known that, they would have said, you know what, I don't want to play for y'all. Y'all been lying on my name and all that type of stuff, right? But you know, they won't do that. So, um, so that could be it. So I gotta take that with a grain of salt, right? That's what I heard happen, but you gotta take it with a grain of salt. Is it draft season? Is it a little smoky in here? That could theoretically be the case, but I was kind of like, but the Giants really pass up on him? Like, of course, I haven't predicted to go to the Cowboys, but the Giants really pass up on him? Well, with the signing of Jameis and the signing of Russell Wilson, especially Russell Wilson to a $21 million year deal, I mean, I don't think Shador Sanders is signing up to be a backup. At the very least, he wants to be in a position where he can compete for the starting job. That's not saying he'll win it outright from a veteran, but at the very least, I want to be able to compete for it. And if you just signed a guy to a 1 year, $21 million deal and signed another guy to a 2 year, $8 million deal, where maybe Russell retires after this year, and then you still have a Jameis on a $4 million deal where he can be your bridge to your next guy, whatever it might be. I don't think you're drafting a quarterback high, at least not at 3. So he could theoretically be available at 9. Or I think it's feasible that if the Saints wanted him, excuse me, you can call New England, you can call Jacksonville, you can maybe call Vegas, but I wouldn't call Vegas because I think Vegas may want to jump on him. Now, I have Vegas drafting Jackson Dart because I'm just of the mindset that they could fall in love with the traits and everything like that and draft him. But of course, we understand the relationship that Shador has with the Raiders organization, and I could see the Raiders saying, "Hell no, we're gonna take him at 6." So with that being said, I would probably not talk to the Raiders. Um, Now, of course, Jacksonville and New England may talk to the Raiders and say, "Hey, Saints called us. They want Shador." Now, I think that's bad business, but if New England and Jacksonville think they can get an even better deal out of Vegas and force their hand, then they might do that. So I would definitely take him at 9 if he's available. Again, he's the second quarterback on my list. Like, yes, I have certain concerns about holding on to the ball and taking sacks, especially given our offensive line still being a work in progress. But hey, I'm down. I'm ready. He's the second best quarterback in the class for me, and was at one point in time making an argument for the best quarterback in his class. And if I can get that guy on the New Orleans Saints, and I think he's a guy much like Cam Ward that are guys that can be ready day one. They can win the job or go through camp or whatever and be your guy week one. Hell yeah, I want him in black and gold. So uh, when it comes to how he's viewing the Saints organization, I think again, initially it was more of a pipe dream. Then I think it became a hey, we really at least want to talk to this guy because now you're starting to have discussions of he may be available. Cam might not be available, but if we're talking about the second quarterback taking this draft, we could be a player in that at that point in time. And just had a bad interview. We've all had bad interviews, so we're hoping that maybe they fly out to that pro day that's coming up, have an opportunity to meet with him again. Both sides can express their interest in the other, that type of thing, and we can go from there. So, just kind of wrap up the Kellen Moore thoughts. Realistically speaking, Jalen Milroe, who I actually have predicted to go to the New Orleans Saints, is probably your quarterback that's drafted. Um, I do think you end up trading a Derek Carr at the end of or sometime in the off season, and I think you bring in a vet to come in. I mean, there are some vets that are still out there, but we'll see. I think there were some guys, don't shoot the messenger, as my boy Logan would say, but based on what happened today with the signing of Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston probably should have waited a little bit longer before he signed with the team. But that's neither here nor there. Anyways, DJ, when you watch the episode, I hope I did it justice. I hope I answered all of the questions and hit the content that you wanted. And just for your occasional fan, man, I hope y'all enjoyed this too, because this was fun. I like breaking this type of stuff down. Um, and if there's any thoughts or any other topics you guys want me to cover next week, please let me know. We'll be more than happy to do it. But anyways, as I end today's show, like I always do, if there's anything I said that offended anyone, that's a good thing. It's an opportunity for me to learn. It's an opportunity for you to teach me. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. Peace.